So we'll get started. We have what every contractor developer needs to know to be stormwater smart. And we have Don Barbee, Matthew Hendrix, both from the County Stormwater Coalition, and then Tolman from Accena SWPPP Services presenting today.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Like he mentioned, my name is Don Barbee. I'm with the coalition, and I also work for Sandy City Corporation. So we're representing the Salt Lake County Stormwater Coalition, which is made up of compliance companies and MS4 UPDS permittees, municipalities throughout Salt Lake County. Why does stormwater matter? Stormwater management is one of the most critical environmental responsibilities that we face today. Let's break down why that's important, especially for contractors and developers. Water is our greatest resource, and pollutants threaten this resource. Every rainfall event has the potential to transfer contaminants into rivers, lakes, and streams. And what is the threat? The threat is pollution from impervious surfaces. Roads, parking lots, construction sites don't absorb water. Therefore, stormwater carries oils, contaminants such as trash, chemicals, and sediments directly into our waterways. This leads to degraded water quality, harming aquatic life, and making water unsafe for humans. So why contractors and developers play a role? Construction sites are hotspots for sediment and pollution runoff. Developers make landscape choices about drainage, materials, and vegetation, which directly impacts water quality. And now I will turn it over to Matthew.
Hello, good morning. So again, I am Matthew Hendrix. I'm with Salt Lake City Public Utilities, but today I guess Dawn did not skip slides. She had a lovely slide to go with what she was describing, but that's okay. It is really true that construction impacts water quality to a much higher degree than regular land uses and land development. So it is a really important topic. There are 3 phases of construction: pre-construction, during, and post-construction. I'm here today to talk about pre and post. But the first step, I would say, in understanding how to develop a property in a way that doesn't harm stormwater quality and receiving water resources is to do your proper planning and documentation. So I would say, I put it at the bottom, but for pre-construction, a site reconnaissance is really important, but it's also, of course, most important to know your site's planning. So some engineer and architect has designed a site, and you have to understand what they've designed, how can that actually be constructed on the property that you've chosen to do that on. And that is, so I put it at the bottom, but really it's at the top. So really understanding the dynamics of that site will help you do a good job of preventing pollution, and that is the goal here. So the important things to consider are things like soils on the site, the vegetation on the site. These impact the erosivity of the water and then the ability to phase your project in a way that minimizes disturbance. Slopes also come into play because of the impact of runoff running down slopes, but also it just changes how you're managing the site. There are sensitive areas such as vegetative buffers along riparian corridors. There's infiltration galleries. There's wetlands. All these things need to be protected during construction and development. So understanding where they are and knowing how to control pollution from entering those sources is really important. Understanding your groundwater is also very important because high groundwater table means you're probably going to need to end up dewatering. So we'll get to that here in a second. Understanding the historic land use is also really essential, at least in terms of knowing the contaminants and the potential debris that you might find on a site. And then, of course, receiving waters is really, really important because it changes the dynamics of the site based on whether or not the receiving water body is considered high quality or impaired. Here in Utah, we have a pollution discharge elimination system that requires people to get a stormwater permit if you meet certain thresholds of development and disturbance. Those are broken down mainly by the size of the disturbance. There's a general permit, and then there's a common plan permit. In both cases, in the general permit, the case is that if it's an acre or more of disturbance, then you need a permit. If it's part of a common plan of development that's going to disturb at least an acre, then it also needs that permit, even if it is less than an acre. But there's another permit that can be useful if you're building homes that are an acre or less in disturbance, but they are part of a large development plan. So you have to get coverage for those, and then there's requirements from those permits that dictate how the site can be developed. The secondary issue would be dewatering. I mentioned if you have a high groundwater table, there is a permit for that. There's a series of permits. I won't go over them right now, but just understand that they are required if they're being discharged, because those dewatering impacts can be pretty substantial to the receiving waters. By virtue of having a permit, you are required to develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan, also known as a SWPPP. It's required for both kinds of permits, but there are some differences. There is a template that was created by the state that we can use that can help guide the development of a SWPPP, so it meets all the requirements of those permits. It's really easy to follow. And there's also an evaluation form that was created that can help people determine whether or not the SWPPP that's been developed for them or created by them is in compliance with those permits. It's very useful. We have a little snapshot of it here that we'll go over at another time. But the important thing to remember is that the SWPPP is a living document. It is expected to change over time as things go on. It will include things like who's doing what on the property, if there's a SWPPP team, the nature of the activity that's going on, the quality of the water, the receiving water from the site. These are all important considerations. The methods by which people will prevent pollution during construction, the stabilization requirements for that is in terms of vegetative or non-vegetative cover, who's going to respond to a spill and what are they going to do when they respond. All of this is really essential to sticking to a plan that will prevent pollution during construction. Permit coverages and delegations of authority, these are all developed in the SWPPP. And let's see, I think I am running low on time, it would seem. Okay, sorry about that. Well, just know that when a site is ready to begin construction, it's essential that they have a pre-construction meeting. The permittee has a pre-construction meeting with either the MS4, the city, the county, whoever is regulating their site, and they'll go over the complexities of the site and make sure that the site's ready. They'll also look at the BMPs that were installed. BMPs are best management practices. These are things used to control erosion and sediment and pollution, and that will be confirmed. And once approved, the project can begin working, and it's up to the contractor to know all the specifics of their own plan and their own permitting so that they can get the job done in a way that protects water quality. So with that, I trade off to Hank Tolman with the Accena Group.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Yeah, so Matthew talked about everything that we want to do. Before we actually get started on construction, I'm going to talk about what we're going to do once we start construction, a little bit beforehand too. Probably the most important thing that we want to do when we're talking about construction is implement the right best management practices. So best management practices are the controls that's going to stop pollutants from running off your sites, stop pollutants from leaving, and controlling those, maintaining them on site, making sure that they're cleaned up before they get into our water bodies. I made a list of some of the most common BMPs. This isn't a comprehensive list, but this is kind of some of the ones that are most common for us. Also, I wanted to mention that USWAC, and Matthew brought this up to me before the presentation here, but USWAC has developed a new BMP manual, which is a great starting point for you if you're gonna, if you're looking at what BMPs to use, and also if you're looking for specifications that need to be in your SWPPP document. Go look there for that manual. It's going to be on the USWAC website, and you can get specifications for these best management practices. So a couple of the ones that we have here, we have perimeter controls, lots of different types here, and you're going to want to choose them. We're not going to get into all of that today. I'm more than happy to talk to you at length, ad nauseum, about what BMPs you should use and at what times, but you want to choose the BMPs that are going to work best for your site. You want to choose perimeter controls. Perimeter controls are designed to stop pollutants from leaving the site. So if you're implementing perimeter controls where no stormwater or no pollutants are ever going to leave the site, like at the top of a slope, you're probably wasting money. And you may even be polluting because something like a silt fence is going to degrade and it's going to fall apart, and then that's going to be a pollutant on your site, right? So you want to make sure that you're using them correctly. Inlet protections, there's lots of options depending on the types of inlets that you have. You can do an inlet insert, you can do an inlet barrier, you can do an inlet cover, right? We have track out controls. Track out controls, I think more than anything, are something that is not very well understood or not very well thought out on a lot of our construction sites. If you're finding yourself having to sweep your streets a lot and spend a lot, street sweepers are not cheap, right? If you're finding yourself having to sweep your streets a lot, you need to look at what you're using for track out controls, because that should be stopping a lot of that track out from coming off onto the pavement outside of your sites. If you're not using appropriate track out control, you're going to be wasting a ton of money doing street sweeping, and there's something wrong. So we need to figure it out, right? We're used to always just throwing down some gravel, some aggregate. Hey, let's just throw down a 20-foot by 50-foot pad of 3 to 6 inch aggregate down there, and we're good to go. That's not always the case, especially when we're coming into this time period. Within a couple of days, that's going to be compacted into the ground. That's not going to be kicking off any dirt anymore. It's going to be full of mud, and everything's just going to be leaving the site. And the city's going to be upset at you. Your neighbors, more than the city, your neighbors are going to be upset at you, and then you're going to have to start getting that street sweeper truck going out there a ton. So we want to think about this before we're starting our site. Are we using appropriate track out controls to maintain that track out off our site? Trash and washout. A lot of people don't consider, I mean, the washout, a lot of people consider as a control. We're talking about like the concrete washout and stuff, but a lot of people don't consider trash to be a SWPPP or a stormwater concern. And so there's I always get lots of pushback about the dumpsters, right? Well, that's just trash. That has nothing to do with stormwater. That's not true. Where do you think that trash is going after it blows out of your dumpster and into the street, right? It's going to end up in a water body, in a wetland, somewhere where we don't want it, right? None of us want it there. Trash control is a best management practice, and it is a best management practice that you need to address in your SWPPP, and you need to have a specification for in your SWPPP. How are you going to manage that? Are you going to have bagged trash? You're going to bag up the blowable trash daily. You're going to have some covered dumpsters for blowable trash, and then maybe an uncovered dumpster that you only use for construction waste. You know, something like you got to figure it out, but it's something that we need to take into consideration. And then sanitary waste. I have seen so many portable toilets tipped over in the gutters and blue juice running down the gutters. It's disgusting, and we don't want to swim in that, right? Nobody wants to go out and into beautiful Bear Lake where it's nice, pristine waters, and then there's some blue juice floating along next to us. It's disgusting, right? So we need to make sure that we're managing this properly. Those portable toilets, if you haven't tried, next time you see a portable toilet that's not staked down, try moving it. It's incredibly light. The wind will blow it over. It absolutely will. They need to be secured so that they're not going to blow over and pollute our water bodies, right? All right, so those are some common BMPs. Like I said, please check out the manual on the USWAC website. And then, you know, there's lots of resources for how to select the appropriate BMPs. But we want to use the right ones for the right thing on your site. Okay, there's lots of options, but what is right for your project based on what's happening on your project? All right, let's talk about inspections. Huge confusion. I always get so many questions about this. Just last week, I had somebody ask me, hey, the city's mad because we don't have any inspections. They want inspection reports, but the city comes out every month and does the inspection. I don't understand. Why aren't, you know, they have the inspection report. They're the ones doing the inspection. Okay, all right. So there are separate inspection requirements. Okay, the contractor and developer, the site owner, has the responsibility to conduct what we call self-monitoring inspections during the construction process. Those self-monitoring inspections are required either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on your site and depending on your choice. Weekly, you know, once every 7 days or once every 14 days and after a rain event of a ½ inch or enough snow melt to cause runoff, to cause a discharge. Or if you're next to an impaired water body, then you really don't have a choice. If the nearest receiving water to you is impaired, which is again something that we run into all the time. Some people, if you're preparing your own SWPPPs, if you're trying to, you know, go through the documentation, you got to look up what your actual receiving water body is. Can't tell you how many times I look at SWPPPs in Utah County, and Utah Lake is the receiving water. No matter where they are in Utah County, it's always Utah Lake. Well, that's great, but Utah Lake is impaired, so it doesn't matter. You're going to be doing the extra inspections. But it's not always Utah Lake. It's not always the Great Salt Lake. It's not always the Jordan River. There's lots of water bodies you need to look out for. If it's impaired, then you have an increased inspection frequency. There are some reductions possible. I'm not going to get into those today, but based on situations on your site, you may be able to reduce inspection frequencies under very, very specific circumstances, and that's in the general permit. We can look at that. Now, what about the municipality? They do come out and do inspections, right? So why? The municipalities operate under a different permit. The municipalities aren't operating under the construction general permit. They're doing oversight on the construction general permit, but they have their own requirements under a separate permit that they have to adhere to. Those require them to go out to every construction site and conduct an oversight inspection at least once a month, and then if that site has been designated as a priority site, then twice a month, right, every 14 days. All right, what about electronic site inspections? Maybe you've heard of these or maybe you haven't. This is kind of a new thing this year, but there is an option for you to provide electronic site inspections. The state has a great list. It's on the USWAC website as well, a great list of what is the expectation for these electronic site inspections. And then you'll be able to submit that to the municipality and they can use that as their oversight inspection. But it needs to meet the requirements, it needs to meet the specifications that they have to adhere to. Otherwise, it's not going to work and they're going to still need to come out to your site. All right, overall site compliance. Here's some common violations. I'm going to skip through real quick because I'm out of time, but you can look at that later on. But these are common violations that we see. All right, and I'll turn it back over to Matt for post.
Thank you, Hank. So obviously, pre and during construction are essential, but at the end of your project, you want to get the job done and move on. The way to do that is to first stabilize your site because it was disturbed when all the vegetation was removed, and now we need to get back to a functional, non-discharging state. And the way we do that is by primarily vegetation, but it also can be non-vegetative measures. And the idea is that because these permits dictate how you're supposed to approach controlling these sites, you do have to stick to their rules with regarding what constitutes stabilization. And the way that it looks is for anything that's vegetated, it has to be uniform, so that's 100% coverage, perennial vegetation with at least 70% density. And that just means no bare areas. A really good way to note that if you're looking at a site and you can generally don't see any bare areas, you're probably doing pretty well, but there's something called a hula hoop method where you can toss out a hula hoop, see where it lands, anywhere on the property, and you should be able to see full coverage and at least 70% density, just to show that it's being accomplished. Now, there are exceptions to this. This is in your arid, semi-arid, and drought-stricken areas that the permit allows for differences to that. The main one being that if you are using vegetation, you just have to plant it and seed it in a way that it will become vegetated within 3 years, which is, and then the permit can be terminated at that point. So that's a little bit hard to be certain about, but if you have a plan for it and it's approved, then go ahead and go forward with it. There are non-vegetative measures that can work. Those can be like riprap, gravel, Gabion baskets, geotextiles. Mulch is probably another good example. It's just anything that's going to prevent the erosion of the dirt when it does rain later after the project completes, and then doesn't create erosion or sediment transport off-site. So there are areas that may not have to be vegetated or covered, and that's things like dirt access roads or utility pole pads. Again, these are allowances within the permits to achieve stabilization and end your permit to terminate it. The deadlines are really, there's temporary cessation of activities and there's permanent cessation. So if an area becomes inactive for more than 30 days, it has to be stabilized either temporarily or permanently. That's a requirement of the permit. But generally, as long as the work is still happening, then there's no need to stabilize until that inactivity reaches 30 days. But at the end of the project, it is going to have to be stabilized. So with inactivity for 30 days or more, you should have initiated stabilization, either the planting or non-vegetative. And then after starting that effort, it has to be done within 30 days. So you have to make sure that you get the site stable. Completing it as soon as practicable is the idea. And of course, there are exceptions once again if you're in an arid, semi-arid area. So here on the Wasatch Front, we are not generally stuck with these issues, but there are periods of drought that can occur. And when they do, it just, once again, you can install those measures in a way that they will vegetate within 3 years. But sometimes you need to control erosion in those situations. If it's a flat land, it's generally okay. But if the steeper the site, the more potential for erosion exists. So there's a need to use erosion and sediment controls during the vegetative process. But again, if you have a plan for that, you're going to be okay to achieve that stabilization and be able to terminate your permit. And then, of course, if you're discharging to a sediment or nutrient impaired water body, it really the exception there is you really have to get this done within 30 days. There's no real there's no waiting. You just have to get it done because you want to protect those sensitive water bodies. There is a need once you've completed stabilization to end your project to terminate it. The permit has conditions of termination that are spelled out, like what it means to be able to terminate. And those can be broken down to one major instance and a few others. The main one is that if construction's done, if you're done with the development of your property, that means that you've achieved final stabilization, you removed all construction-related materials and activities, all the temporary BMPs have been removed, and all pollutant-generating activities have ceased, and those sources are removed from the site, you can terminate. But if not, the only other way to terminate is if you transfer it to somebody else who's going to take on that job and get their own permit and have that coverage confirmed. Or if there's an instance where you got a different kind of permit from the state that says, okay, and you're no longer under the general permit, but you have these other opportunities. And then, of course, the one other issue is if you have a series of lots being developed in a subdivision, if you're passing it off to the owner, you don't necessarily have to stabilize, but you do have to have erosion and sediment controls in place. And then once you've done that, you submit your form to the state saying that you're terminating. When you do that, it triggers the cities to know that you're ready for termination, and then they can come out and do their final inspection. But it's really important to communicate with your inspectors for the regulatory authority so that you have a conversation about when this is necessary. You will have to terminate your city permits if you have one with the city. Otherwise, just follow whatever those requirements are. You have to schedule a final inspection. That's where the city's going to come out and confirm what we just talked about, whether or not the site is stable and whether or not it's ready to be closed out. And then, yeah, that has to be approved. That termination through the central data exchange is the place with which permits are obtained and terminated through the state. That is the last step, is where the city will come out and approve that termination. And once that's done, you're ready to go and you can move on with your life. But the last element of this is that there is a consideration for after construction is completed. There's a lot of research and documentation out there about what happens to a property once it's been developed and how that additional runoff and the quality of that runoff from those properties can affect water quality. So sometimes, depending on the situation during planning and development of the plans for a project, it can be required to use long-term stormwater management BMPs. Those are things like detention and retention ponds, permeable pavements, bioswales, vegetative buffers. These are all, and even treatment devices. These are all things that will to help protect water quality after development. And if you've been required to include that in your planning and you've built that, I think your last job is really to make sure that those were installed to plan as expected and required. And this is something that you can show, and somebody should have been inspecting it from the city side. And then the last step is to have either yourself or somebody should have developed a long-term stormwater management plan. That's required by the MS4 permit, that cities and municipalities then go to property owners and say, hey, this is needed. We're going to regulate the fact that you've developed one and stuck to it in perpetuity. This sticks with the property owner as well. It's not just the developer that has to deal with. That's why it's nice if it's developed early, but it does need to be in place once the property has changed hands. And cities will come out and regulate that. There are fines possible for not maintaining those BMPs, so it's just really essential. And that's really the last step. You know, we've gone through the full arc of construction, so I think the big picture here is that we are protecting water resources by controlling development in a way that minimizes stormwater pollution. Dawn, did you have final comments?
We all live downstream.
We all live downstream. That is so true. And I hope we all remember it. And the next time you see a construction site, if you're not sure about what you're seeing, you can go up to their SWPPP sign and look at who is operating that site and who can you talk to about the concerns that you have, because it is public facing. We are interactive and we do have to respond. And if you see a problem that you can't address through that effort, contact your city, local, state authorities and let them know what you're seeing. And as developers and contractors, if you have any questions about what you're accomplishing or having to deal with on a site, it's really essential to reach out to your authorities to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So we're going to go to Q&A, but if you need more information, there's a QR code to the Stormwater Coalition's page, and it's an incredibly useful resource. So with that, do we have any questions? Does anybody have any thoughts? Or yes, ma'am.
Hello, this probably isn't in your wheelhouse exactly, but I haven't succeeded in finding who thinks. But anyway, I live near Wheeler Farm and Little Cottonwood Creek runs through that, and occasionally there's foam on the creek. Who would I call to say there's foam on the creek?
That's a really good question. I don't know, it's in Murray, right? So Murray City might be a good place to reach out to their stormwater group. But what I'd like to point out is there's such a thing as natural bioturbation that creates natural foaming. That's very common in a lot of places, but especially in our area because we get rain so infrequently. So a lot of times what you're seeing is just the impacts of a rain event that's finally reaching a stream. And as that stream kind of roars downstream and it collects in little low points, it can develop a lot of foam. I've seen it a lot. It can be alarming. But a lot of times it's actually natural. But I would say calling your city first. If not, you can call the county. The county's got an incredible response division that will follow up on any complaints that they receive. And then if at the end of that, if you're still not satisfied, you can call the state. There is an environmental response crew that will take that call and reach out to all appropriate parties. So that's a really good point, and that's what I would do.
What's the name of the city department that would be?
It's usually stormwater services, or public utilities. It just depends on the city. I don't know the breakdown in Murray, but yeah.
Yeah,
Sir.
Matthew, I'm Carl Adams, Division of Water Quality Stormwater Specialist. And if you Google is your best tool for finding information about stormwater. So if you type in the city name and stormwater, 9 times out of 10, it'll pop up who the contact is for that.
Very true.
So quick plug, excellent presentation, tons of information, great website. There are a couple others that I wanted to mention to folks. One is the USWAC website. It's not as pretty as it could be, but we're working on it as a, supporting agency for USWAC, the Utah Stormwater Advisory Committee. And the other plug is for the Division of Water Quality's Stormwater website. And specifically construction, there's a kind of memorable, easy link if you type in construction.stormwater.utah.gov. Right? Construction, stormwater, utah.gov. We got lots of information on there as well. And now I was wondering, or hoping you could speak to the importance of management and the tie with the site inspections. If you could speak of the importance of site inspections for management, I should say.
And when you say management, you mean site management or
Yeah,
Oh, okay. So
Action.
obviously the inspections there's the two types of inspections that Hank mentioned, but the operators' self-inspections are to identify areas where there are problems, and the expectation is that those things will be corrected in a timely manner. It's usually about a 7-day window to allow for those corrections to happen, but sometimes it can be immediate, like if something is found to have been intentionally disabled or run over or removed to gain access to a location, it's important to replace that immediately. But if it's just breaking down over time, then it does allow for some time. But you always want to keep rain events in mind. If you know there's a storm coming, let's get those things repaired so that we can protect water quality. So I think that's the main thing, is that these inspections have to happen, but there's a response to those inspections that's really essential, and that's managed through the operators, just kind of SWPPP team, how they communicate. And then as regulators, when they come out, they want to check to make sure that those timelines and those conditions are being handled properly, and they will hopefully notice that and speak up if they see a concern. But there's always a back and forth communication. We don't want people to feel like they're being attacked for failing to live up to an obligation from their permits, but it is true that we have to enforce them. So the best thing that somebody can do is to communicate. So just keep an open, I would say, line of communication. So thank you for that question. Anybody else, ma'am?
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Sure.
So my question is, if your construction area is next to a city road and also next to a UDOT road, who has jurisdiction and how do they get notified if you just submit your permit through the state website?
That's a really good question, and I think that comes down to the planning stages of the development. You know, if you have a UDOT connection to their storm sewer system, because they have UDOT pipes that are within cities along their roadways, then you should probably have been aware of that and hopefully been in contact with them. It's generally going to be the municipality, but it is true that if you're discharging into their infrastructure, you may need to have a permit with both of them. You only need one state permit, to be clear, but you may need approvals from both the city and UDOT. So that's actually something that I struggle with, and I think it's a hard thing to understand. So I would say reach out to your local stormwater division for the municipality to see if they even are aware that there's a UDOT infrastructure along that path, and then definitely reaching out to UDOT directly. They have their really strong stormwater division that will help you understand those implications as well. But my understanding is there's likely going to be a local permit for each. So hopefully that answers your question. Any others? I think I saw a hand in the back, but I know we're out of time, so I appreciate that. And I guess, well, thank you all for your time. It's been a good day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your symposium.